Can you go ahead and start the recording? Perfect. So now we're recording, and Anna, it is on to you. Go ahead, please.
Can everyone see my slides and not presenter view? Awesome. Okay, great. So hi, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us today. I'll reintroduce myself a little bit. My name is Anna, and I'm going to be presenting a talk titled Leveraging Lived Experience, Insights, Research, and Resources for Siblings of Autistic Individuals. So just a little bit about me. Once again, I'm a research coordinator at McGill University based at the Neuro. I recently graduated with a master's in neuroscience, where I conducted research on the experiences of caregivers of youth with developmental disabilities during the pandemic and how public policy aligned with their needs. I'll be starting my PhD in educational psychology at McGill once again in the fall, and I'm hoping to become a school psychologist, clinical psychologist. We'll see where that takes us, and a researcher to support autistic individuals across the lifespan. And of course, I'm the big sister to an autistic young adult named Manoli. So here's what we're going to be getting into in the next few minutes. So my experience as a sibling to an autistic person, research on siblings of individuals with disabilities in general, some insights for clinicians and I guess practitioners even generally, as I'm seeing we have a very diverse group here today. And finally, some resources for siblings of youth with disabilities. So my experience. So as I've mentioned, I'm the older sister to an autistic young adult named Manoli. You can see a few pictures of us here on the screen from when we were both kids up until his graduation last year. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'm really going to focus on my own experience as a caregiver and not divulge specific information about how autism has affected him specifically or what his quote unquote symptoms look like. I want to do this for two important reasons. I want to make sure that I respect Manoli's right to privacy, and I also am aware of the fact that autism manifests itself very differently from one person to another, and my brother's strengths and weaknesses or challenges, let's say, are not necessarily shared by all autistic people. So we're really going to be focusing on that caregiver experience. So this is a little bit of what the early years looked like for us. So we had some challenges related to navigating our sibling relationship. We had very different communication styles and had some trouble finding common ground with each other. And playing together as siblings was a challenge. Also a limited understanding of autism and how it affected my brother, myself, and my family members. Manoli was diagnosed when he was about 3 years old and I was 7. I had never met a person on the autism spectrum before and did not know what it meant for him and how his development would progress. I also didn't understand the extent to which it affected my parents and did not consider even how it affected me for a very long time, even into adulthood, I would say. So my parents did explain autism to me, but I still felt a considerable amount of anxiety about the future. Talking about autism with others was also a bit of a challenge. So as we know, a lot of other family members, friends, and just people out in the community do not necessarily know what autism is. And I would say that this was also in the early-ish 2000s. So the autism acceptance and awareness movement wasn't as big as it is now. And this kind of leads into my next point, which is learning to be an advocate at a very early age. I felt like I needed to be my brother's protector as a child. So you grow up a little bit faster sometimes when you have a sibling that is diagnosed at such a young age. So what about some research? I wanted to cover a little bit of research about what's been done about siblings up until this point. So generally, the sibling relationship can be the longest relationship in a person's life, and we know that it changes over time. The presence of an autistic sibling can impact the psychological and emotional development of their typically developing sibling. And the typically developing sibling may be a role model for learning skills and behaviors for their autistic sibling. And these typically developing siblings can experience a sense of responsibility, concerns about the future, friendship difficulties, and a lack of desire to talk about their sibling experiences. And before we head into the next part about this, I want to point out that when I was doing research around this topic, I noticed that a lot of the research seemed to have been done a very long time ago, number one. And number two, I felt like it was a little bit reductive. It focused a lot on the challenges of the sibling relationship and not enough, I think, on the strengths. So a little more recently, Schmier et al., these researchers interviewed 15 non-autistic siblings aged 7 to 17 and 15 parents of autistic children to understand the experience of growing up with an autistic sibling. They found that typically developing siblings of autistic children do have unique support needs, and if those needs are consistently overlooked, the well-being of the typically developing sibling can be negatively impacted. That being said, typically developing siblings develop intrapersonal skills from their sibling relationship as a result of this. And very interestingly, and this was kind of the result I wanted to focus on, typically developing siblings actually report being closer to the sibling who is on the autism spectrum more than the parents would expect. And I do think that this is probably true in my household as well. So how this relationship develops over time. Relationships between a typically developing teenager and their autistic sibling can undergo tension during childhood and adolescence. When neurotypical siblings have strong support systems, coping skills, and autism knowledge, they can experience higher quality sibling relationships, and this can also lead to better emotional outcomes in both siblings. And what about the transition to adulthood? So siblings of adolescents and young adults with a disability can adopt different roles, such as their friend, role model / mentor, protector, advocate, supporter, and caregiver. Now, I realize that many of the professionals or participants here today work primarily with children and teens, but since we know from research that many siblings of youth on the autism spectrum have questions or concerns about the future, I thought it would be a good idea to include some more recent research that has been done on adult siblings of individuals with disabilities as well. So namely, it's the Siblings Canada survey. So this is a survey conducted by Siblings Canada in partnership with researchers to understand the needs of adult siblings of individuals with disabilities. So Siblings Canada is an initiative of the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence, which is a sort of caregiver hub that is powered by the Israeli Foundation in Canada. 350 adult siblings responded to the survey, and here are some of the results that I actually wanted to zero in on. So 69% have had conversations with their families about the future, but the majority recognize that there is still more to discuss. 89% play supporting roles in the lives of their siblings with disabilities, which is an overwhelming majority. And 85% feel that it is important for them to connect with other siblings of individuals with disabilities. And that'll bring me to my next section. So what are some insights that we can draw based on some personal experiences and some research? So I'll close the loop on personal experiences first. So my relationship with my brother has greatly changed over time. We've had pretty tough moments, but over the years have been able to find common ground and become incredibly close through activities that we both enjoy. So as you can see, we go for walks, we love to lounge by the pool in the summer, and we do puzzles every single night. We've been able to find things that we can bond over, which I feel has improved our communication and our trust. This didn't happen overnight. It took many years, hard work from both of us, and just generally, I think, even maturing as adults. But we've been able to come a long way. He's my best friend, and I'm going to be his caregiver forever. I think that our relationship has benefited from supports that we've received over the years, namely from our parents, working with the incredible team at his school in Giant Steps, Montreal, and finally, some researchers and clinicians who have helped shape me as a researcher and a caregiver who are present here today. So thanks for that. Some advice for clinicians and professionals, I can say. So self-care for siblings, I think, is one thing that needs to be a little bit more at the forefront. So promoting self-care strategies for siblings to help them manage stress and maintain their own well-being. Supporting parents also in talking to their typically developing children about their siblings' disability. This is very important. Continuous discussions are needed across the lifespan to address evolving family dynamics. Some inclusive clinical practices. So where possible, invite typically developing siblings to assessments and interventions with their parents to help them learn strategies to support their sibling. Of course, this where possible is something that I want to emphasize here. Collaborative care plans as well. So siblings are often underestimated caregivers. Including siblings in care planning throughout the lifespan ensures that their needs and perspectives are consistently addressed. And finally, resource sharing. So remaining up to date with resources for siblings siblings of individuals with disabilities and choosing the ones that best fit your practice. I would also add to aim to find resources that are relevant for different life stages, even if you are only working with one specific age group. So keeping a sort of a library of different kinds of resources that will sort of be appropriate over time could be helpful. Which actually leads us to our next point, which is resources for siblings of youth with disabilities. I will note before I go even further that there are very few resources for siblings of autistic youth and just youth with disabilities in general in Canada. So it was a little hard to find some things that would work, but nonetheless, we found some pretty strong ones that I'll show here. So the first that I'd like to present is the Holland Bloorview SIP kits. So it's a series of interactive child-friendly info booklets for siblings and parents of Holland Bloorview patients. The resources in the SIP kits include child-friendly information about different diagnoses, including autism. I think there's some information about Down syndrome, and actually some even neurological diseases are included in there. Tips for explaining a child's diagnosis to their sibling for parents. A guide to support siblings' understanding of their feelings about their sibling's diagnosis, a guide to support typically developing siblings and sharing information about their sibling with others, and that's actually included in the screenshot that I've shared here, and additional resources for young siblings that are found at the annex at the end of the document. I've included a QR code. I have no idea if it works. I tried my best, but I am not tech savvy, so if it doesn't, I apologize. And then I'll also include the Siblings Canada website as a whole. So this is once again one of the parts of that hub, that caregiver hub that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And this is a little bit more geared towards adults. So this website has resources, research briefs, and courses in both English and French for siblings of individuals with disabilities. Some of the courses, like there's a pretty broad range of courses, but one of the courses that I actually find quite interesting is actually even about applying for tax benefits on behalf of your sibling with a disability. So kind of tying into really that caregiver role. There's a peer mentorship program between siblings of individuals with disabilities as well. And twice a year, they run acceptance and commitment therapy workshops for adult siblings of individuals with disabilities. So that is our second resource. So I'll sort of wrap up here. The presence of an autistic child will affect all members of the family. Typically, developing siblings of autistic youth may experience concerns about the future, difficulties navigating conversations with others about autism, and challenges related to their sibling relationship across the lifespan. And I want to stress this point, this sibling relationship can nonetheless be one of the happiest and most rewarding parts of either sibling's life. I can speak to that personally. Typically, developing siblings, however, need educational, emotional, and practical supports to understand how disability has affected them and their sibling. And finally, most typically developing siblings do adopt a caregiver role later on in their lives, and it is important to talk about autism with typically developing siblings across the lifespan. And I think I'm good on time, which is wonderful. So thank you. I've left my email here if ever you want to send any questions, or if there are any resources I can send, or if you want to talk about policy like my thesis. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Can you unshare your screen so I can see everybody again? Thank you so much. That was, as I knew it would be,